Finnish interest is present very obvious in Indonesia forestry sector. Through their consultant, they have been involved for many years in the forestry sector, the logging, plantation, and recently with pulp mills. In summary, they are very linked, yeah, between Indonesian forestry with Finnish companies here. You name it, UPM, Komini, Jacopori, Stora Enso, they are highly involved in the forestry sector in Indonesia, and now especially in the pulp mills sector.
Well, Finland plays a very major role in global forest policies in the UNFF in different other forms as well, but on the project level, the Finnish forest industry, both the companies investing in the southern countries and the companies producing machinery for the pulp and paper industry and for the forest logging, and the financial institutions like export credit agencies, also our aid agencies, and the European and Northern and Nordic investment banks, they all contribute to this thing.
Well, as Tuva was saying, wherever you go in the world, you find the Finnish forestry influence, whether it's Finnish consultants helping to formulate plans for national forestry in cooperation with national governments, or whether it's Finnish consultants and other Finnish experts helping to plan the actual pulp mills and the plantations themselves. If you go to Kalimantan, you see this. If you go to Brazil, you see this. In Thailand, India, everywhere in the world. To people in Finland and probably in Europe generally, this may seem to be a very natural state of affairs. It may seem perfectly reasonable. After all, Finland has a lot of experience in industrial forestry. Finland has a lot of forestry experts, and they're looking for work to do around the world. And what I can say is that these operations have proved to be very, very destructive to local ecologies, to local peoples, to local economies, and to national economies. What we're talking about is a model which is based on the idea of immense scale. We're talking about pulp mills which cost up to $1 billion US, maybe even more, being situated in the middle of giant catchment areas which are required to feed these mills. These catchment areas must be engineered. The land itself must be engineered to produce a uniform raw material to feed these immense mills with the proper efficiency. We're talking about thousands, hundreds of thousands of hectares of forest being used, and then plantations being established to feed these mills. And in this sort of regime, in which you have to have a total centralized control over an ecology, you have to have a simplified ecology, you have to have a sort of totalitarian ecology in order to make the machines work. Obviously, that's going to have a very destructive effect not only on the local ecology, but on the local society.
One perfect example is the case of Aracruz Cellulose in Brazil, in the state of Espírito Santo, which was, of course, designed by Jaakko Pöyry Consulting, and which was then built by different Finnish actors. The Finnish forest industry, both the companies investing in the southern countries and the companies producing machinery for the pulp and paper industry and for the forest logging. And in their view, that is kind of a model of development or modernization, or the kind of so-called sustainable forestry. But for the local people, it's normally loss of at least the livelihood, the kind of income, but sometimes even life. And that's really a big disaster in the local level in all aspects. For example, in the Aracruz plantations, the people living in the forest are the local flag communities, quilombos, and they were formerly planting or growing manioca for the food, and now because of the eucalyptus, all the manioca fields have dried up, so they can't plant and cultivate their food anymore. So that's had a major impact on the survival of these local communities and their kind of livelihoods.
The society has to be simplified in order to make the raw material procurement work. If there are people in the way who are using the land for other reasons, you have to get them out. They're complications. They make the whole thing too complicated to work efficiently. You get them out. If you have other trees, if you have other forests that people use in different ways, different kinds of species, it's a nuisance. It's an inconvenience for this enormous industrial system which is being promoted. You have to simplify the whole thing, so you have these massive stands of thousands and thousands of uniform trees that taken over an entire landscape. What you don't see often when you look at those scenes is the actual social cost of this, as Tuva was mentioning, the social cost to the local communities who depend not only on the land, but the land being used for other things than eucalyptus, but who are dependent on the water, which the eucalyptus plantations also destroy, the water sources which are degraded and impoverished by this single-minded concentration on the huge production of a uniform field of raw materials.
I think it's worth looking in a little bit of detail about the role of Yaku Puru, specifically in the pulp and paper sector in Indonesia. Between the years 1979 and 1993, Yaku Puru won 110 contracts to work in Indonesia. For example, in 1984, they produced a report which was funded by the World Bank, which is basically a blueprint for the pulp and paper industry that we're now seeing in place, for example, in Sumatra. And having done the blueprint for the expansion or the development of this industry, they then won contracts to develop the mills themselves. And Yaku Puru designed these mills specifically to use rainforest timber to produce paper. 8 years ago, I interviewed Yoko Virta from Yaku Puru Consulting about the company's role in Indonesia. And I asked him what his opinion was on the deforestation that was already going on in Sumatra to feed these pulp mills that his company had designed. And he laughed at me and said, "Don't talk about deforestation in Sumatra. We're planting acacia plantations." This was a very good description of what is wrong with this model of forestry that Yaku Puru is helping to export. To Yaku Puru, an acacia plantation is the same thing as a rainforest. And the issues of human rights and rights to land are just put to one side.
I think it's easy to forget that this is actually not the only forest model which is possible, that there are many other forest models which are not only possible but actual. Other types of forestry are not only possible but actual, and they're being practiced in local areas. In Indonesia, in Brazil, people have been working for hundreds of years to develop their relationship with local forest. They have already developed their local forestry. They don't need to have their forestry developed by other people bringing in another model. They are already fully using their forest. They're fully using their fisheries. They're fully using their agriculture. For someone to come in and to simplify this system out of existence is not development. This is not forestry development. This is the imposition of a whole different kind of forestry development, which is wildly inappropriate. So far, I haven't even spoken about the economic consequences of these enormous mills. But one of the consequences of this huge scale of mills is that they're extremely expensive. At the same time, they're extremely capital intensive. That means the machines are just so big and require so few people. Not only do the investors have to invest a huge sum of money in these enormous machines, which could go to other things, much more productive things, but the people who actually benefit from it are very, very few. At the same time that many people are thrown off the land, many people are disemployed or lose their jobs as a result of this. So the economic consequences of this model of enormous scale are often even just as severe as the social consequences and the ecological consequences.
In my opinion, the Finnish foresters can't even manage the Finnish forest. It's a total destruction. We have this 75% of plantation in Finland, no forest. But that's the other issue. But clearly, there's no expertise whatsoever to operate in a different context and different kind of sociological, ecological, historical, cultural context, and that is clearly seen. For example, when Chris knows maybe better when the Finnish Jaakko Pöyry was making the forestry master plan for Thailand some 15 years ago, and they in that process showed total disrespect and total kind of misunderstanding of the whole Thai society and whole Thai kind of culture. So it's really, there's no reason whatsoever for Finns to go to any other country, let alone in their own country, to do these operations, because it's always an ecological and social disaster. And that is of course what Otto was saying, that's a really hard message to get through in our political decision makers. For example, now the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs is renewing the forestry policy of the Office of Development Aid. And there we try to kind of raise this issue that actually Finland should stop any forestry aid because there's no expertise and no kind of competence in that sense. But that remark gets a really hostile reaction from the so-called professionals who just don't understand this kind of language at all. So.